So here we are, back on the beach. And today we're getting to the main point of the story, Jesus and Peter having a heart-to-heart. Now we're told this is the third time that Jesus appeared, but as I shared last week, if that's the case, Peter's behavior seems odd, taking up his old job after being commissioned by Jesus to share the good news. Unless, of course, this story actually captures the first resurrection appearance, the one referred to by Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians. This makes sense to me. As I said last week, Peter likely felt a great deal of shame. He must have felt he'd let Jesus down, no longer really allowed to call himself a disciple, let alone to offer any kind of leadership. And yet, something shifts. Not just in Acts, but in various epistles, we are told that Peter regains his nerve and becomes someone the disciples can rally around. How does this happen? Well, much is made of Jesus asking Peter 3 times if he loved him. Now, we assume the result of that threefold declaration is that Jesus forgives Peter. But nowhere does Jesus say in the story, I forgive you. I've quoted Richard Rohr a few times. Jesus didn't come to change God's mind about us, but to change our mind about God. And I wonder if perhaps there's a corollary to this, that Jesus came to change our minds about ourselves. Because in the end, what is Peter guilty of? Whenever he said, I am not, on one level he was denying that he knew Jesus. But deeper than that, we need to remember that in John's gospel, Jesus keeps saying, I am. I am the good shepherd, the light of the world, the resurrection of the life. These are all identity statements. These are all affirmations that Jesus was sent by God, that Jesus shares in God's life. Jesus washed his disciples' feet as a way for them to share in his life, to share in him, and to be sent by God as he had been. By saying, I am not, Peter distanced himself from all of it. That would have been hard. And yet, in the end, Jesus understood what had happened. There's wordplay in this conversation that we don't get in English. Jesus twice asked Peter, do you agape me? To which Peter says, yes, Lord, I philia you. In Christian theology, agape becomes known as the highest of all loves. In fact, it is self-giving love, the love which is represented on the cross. Peter couldn't bring himself to say, I agape you, Jesus. And that's okay, because in the end, Jesus asks him to shepherd on his behalf just the same. And I think that's where the shift happens. As Jesus accepts Peter where he is at, something opens up inside of Peter. He's able to claim his identity in Christ, accept what it means to be sent as Jesus had been. And thankfully, he is able to do this because where would any of us be if Peter hadn't been renewed in his call? Hadn't accepted what it meant for his feet to be washed, to effectively be baptized into Jesus' ministry, to be sent to share God's love with others. Peter learned to give himself away in love. He learned to accept people as they were, and as such became a bridge between Jewish Christians and non-Jewish Christians. In this, he created space for people to live together in love, witnessing what the world can be if all of us learn to let go of ourselves for others. And the rest of the apostles did very much the same. And as a result, we have many different churches, each shaped by culture as much as shaped by the good news. And friends, the church continues to be in conversation with context and culture. each generation responding to the situation it is in. An example, John Wesley, ministering in an established church that was, well, in my mind, far too cozy with the ruling class. He focused on the needs of those people who were right in front of him, the poor and the forgotten of England. He accepted them and adapted to the situation. He preached outdoors. He formed small groups. He appointed itinerant lay preachers to lead. The result was a whole new generation of people who not only shared life in Christ, but shared of themselves in love to make a difference in the world. The early Methodists were known for their work in prison reform as well as seeking the abolition of slavery. And that, my friends, is our heritage as a congregation. For 210 years, we have responded to new situations with love and compassion. In our early days, our very first members were both social and political reformers. Well, nothing's changed much there then for us. Later, we set up the food bank. We offered support to refugees. We advocated to youth, especially through 360 Kids. Though the Craftsman lunches are on hold, they will ramp up again. We are a community where everyone is accepted as they are. And just as we create a space for people to gather together as a village in our early days, we continue to do this when we are the village commons together. Now, over the years, we've had ups and downs. But each time, like Peter, we have responded to our situation by offering compassion. This is no different as a time. At the start of our pandemic, what did we do? Our first response was to offer support and care to those in our congregation that were most vulnerable, who had been told were the most likely to contract that virus. We did what was needed. We reached out to our elders. We checked in wherever we could, and especially checked in if anybody needed help with errands and other needs. We also shifted our worship online, because how could we help others if we weren't being nurtured spiritually ourselves? But that's only the beginning of our response. As the pandemic continues, we're called to wonder, what is our ongoing purpose as a congregation? What are we being called to do? Who are we being sent to? Who is before us, and what are their needs? How will we help as more and more social gaps become revealed? How do we reach beyond ourselves, especially on the online platform that the lockdown has pushed us onto? How will we meet the needs of our neighbors? What will we be called to let go of in order to respond to those needs? There are a lot of questions before us as a congregation. One of them is finances. Right now, we're doing okay, but we all know that we've been pressured as we continue to grow and age as a congregation. Will this pandemic compound those financial concerns? How do we respond to those concerns? Will we be called to be church without a building? Will we be called to use our building in brand new ways we haven't even thought of? How do we nurture relationships as this becomes our new normal? All of this experience is teaching us what it means to be church right here and right now. The question becomes, what will we bring from those learnings into our future as church? In the end, I have every confidence that we will figure this out, that we will find a way forward, because we're not alone in any of this. We stand on the shoulders of our forebears who are cheering us on. As they responded to the needs around them, we are responding as well. And on top of that, Jesus is with us. We claim our continuing identity in him, and as we do so, he gives us strength. He gives us what we need to share the good news in new ways. In the end, I think we're like grass. We regrow and renew each season. In Christ, we have that same resilience. In him, we are always finding new strength and finding new ways to grow in God's love. Amen. We now take a time of silence.